Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of Viridian Station and watched the stars. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and he still found it amazing. Outside the windows, ships from a dozen different worlds came and went. Some looked like elegant birds made of silver metal. Others were huge boxes covered in lights. Each one belonged to a different species, a different culture, a different way of thinking about the universe. Jake was a liaison officer. That meant his job was to help humans and aliens understand each other. He organized meetings, translated documents, and made sure everyone followed the rules. It was not exciting work most of the time, but Jake liked it. He believed in what he was doing. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 200 years. They were still the new kids, still learning how things worked. The station itself was neutral ground, a place where any species could come to trade or talk. It orbited a white dwarf star that nobody wanted for anything else. The location was perfect because it sat at the crossing point of 5 major powers: the Krell Empire to the north, the Draken Confederation to the east, the Valor Collective to the south, the Archeon Republic to the west, and human space right in the middle. Today was supposed to be a normal day. Jake had 3 meetings scheduled. The first was with a Valor trade representative who wanted to sell crystals that could store computer data. The second was with a Dracon military officer who needed permission to move a fleet through neutral space. The third was with Lynn Harper. Lynn was a xenoarchaeologist. She studied the ruins and artifacts that ancient alien civilizations left behind. She had asked for this meeting a week ago, saying she had found something interesting in the Krell archives. Jake assumed it would be about some old pottery or a carved stone with writing on it. Lynn got excited about that kind of thing. The first 2 meetings went fine. The Valar representative was friendly and professional. The Draken officer was cold and direct, but that was normal for his people. By the time Lynn arrived, Jake was ready for something different. Lynn Harper was younger than Jake, maybe 30 years old, with short brown hair and glasses that she always forgot to clean. She carried a data tablet under one arm and had that look she got when she was onto something big. Jake knew that look. It usually meant his peaceful day was about to get complicated. She sat down across from him and put the tablet on the desk. Without saying hello, she turned it on and pulled up an image. It was a star map, old and faded, with symbols Jake did not recognize. "This is from the Krell Imperial Archives," Lynn said. "It is 12,000 years old." Jake looked at the map. He could make out some familiar patterns. The spiral arm of the galaxy, the major trade routes, and there, on the edge, was a region marked with symbols that looked like warnings. "That is human space," Lynn said, pointing at the marked region. Jake frowned. "That is impossible. 12,000 years ago, humans were still living in caves on Earth. We did not even have writing yet, much less space travel." "I know," Lynn said. "That is what makes this interesting." She pulled up another image. "This is from the Archeon Cultural Database, 8,000 years old." Jake looked. It was a different map, drawn in a different style, but the marked region was in the same place. Human space with the same warnings around it. Lynn kept going. She showed him map after map. Some were 5,000 years old. Some were only 1,000. They came from different civilizations, different eras, different parts of the galaxy, but they all showed the same thing. Human space existed on every map, always in the same location, always surrounded by empty space that nobody was supposed to cross. "This does not make sense," Jake said. "How could our space be marked on maps that are older than our civilization?" Lynn nodded. "That is exactly what I want to know, and there is more." She pulled up a text document. "These are the labels that appear on the maps. Different languages, but they all translate to roughly the same thing. Do not enter, stay away. Forbidden zone. The boundary that must not be crossed." Jake felt a strange chill run down his spine. "Have you asked anyone about this? Anyone from the other species?" Lynn shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, but I did some checking. Every major civilization has these maps. Every single one. And according to the records, nobody questions it. It is just accepted as normal." They talked for another hour. Lynn showed him more evidence. Historical records that mentioned the boundary. Ancient treaties that referenced something called the Silence Protocol. Navigation charts that showed shipping lanes carefully routed around human space, even though going through it would save time and fuel. When Lynn left, Jake sat alone in his office and thought about what he had learned. He pulled up his own star charts and looked at them with new eyes. Sure enough, the pattern was there. Human space sat in a bubble of empty coordinates. No trade routes went through it. No exploration missions. No scientific surveys. It was like the rest of the galaxy had drawn a circle around Earth and its colonies and decided to pretend it did not exist. Jake decided to do some asking around. He started with Ambassador Thelvara, the Krell representative on the station. Thelvara was old, even by Krell standards. Her scales were faded to a pale blue and she moved slowly, but her mind was still sharp. She was known as one of the best historians in the Krell diplomatic service. He found her in the gardens, a place where different species could experience environments from their homeworlds. The Krell section was hot and humid, filled with plants that looked like giant ferns. Thelvara was sitting on a stone bench reading something on a tablet. "Ambassador," Jake said, "may I ask you something about history?" Thelvara looked up. Her eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat. "Of course, Commander Morrison." "What troubles you?" Jake sat down next to her. "I have been looking at old star maps. Ones from before humans joined the galactic community. They show human space as existing long before we had space travel. Can you explain that?" For a moment, Thelvara did not react. Then something strange happened. Her face went blank. Her eyes seemed to lose focus. When she spoke again, her voice sounded flat and distant. "The boundary has always existed. It is not questioned, but why?" Jake asked. "What is the boundary protecting? Or what is it protecting us from?" Thelvara blinked slowly. She seemed to be struggling with something. "I do not know. I have never thought to ask." "That is strange, is it not? I am a historian. I have studied galactic cartography for 200 years. But I have never questioned the boundary." She stood up suddenly, her movements jerky and uncertain. "I must go. I have work to attend to." She walked away quickly, leaving Jake alone in the garden. Over the next few days, Jake asked others. A Velar scientist, a Draken trader, an Archeon priest. Every time he got the same reaction. First confusion, then that strange blank look, then an overwhelming need to change the subject or leave. It was like they could not even think about the question. Their minds just slid away from it. Jake and Lynn met again in his office. They compared notes. Lynn had been doing her own research and she had found something else. Records of past investigations. Over the centuries, there had been others who noticed the anomaly and tried to study it. But every investigation stopped after a short time. The researchers either disappeared or they suddenly lost interest, or they published reports saying there was nothing unusual to find. "This is not natural," Lynn said. "This is something artificial, some kind of mental block that affects every species except us." Jake nodded. "But why does it not affect humans? What makes us different?" They decided to confront Thelvara directly. They found her in her quarters and asked to speak privately. The ambassador looked worried when she saw them, but she let them in. Jake told her everything they had discovered. He showed her the maps, the records, the pattern of failed investigations. As he talked, he watched Thelvara carefully. He could see her fighting something, struggling against an invisible force. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was shaking. "When I was young," she said, "maybe 80 years ago, I began a research project. I wanted to understand the boundary. I spent months gathering data, interviewing other historians, analyzing ancient texts. And then one day I stopped. I cannot remember why. I just woke up one morning and the project seemed unimportant. I moved on to other things." She looked at Jake with fear in her golden eyes. "But now, talking to you, I can remember how I felt back then. I was afraid, terrified. Not of something specific, but of the idea itself, of asking the question. It felt like if I kept investigating, something terrible would happen, not to me personally, but to everyone. The whole galaxy." Lynn leaned forward. "Do you remember anything else? Any clue about what the boundary actually is?" Thelvara closed her eyes. There was something in the old texts, a name, the Silence Protocol, and another phrase, the Treaty of the First Council. But when I tried to research those terms, my mind went blank. I could not even type the words into a search engine without forgetting what I was looking for. Jake felt a weight settling over him. Whatever this was, it was big. Something had happened in the deep past. Something so important that an entire galaxy had been programmed to forget about it. And somehow humans were at the center of it. "We need to find out what the Silence Protocol is," he said. And we need to. The journey to Archeon Prime took 5 days. Jake, Lynn, and Ambassador Thelvara traveled together on a small diplomatic shuttle. The trip gave them time to plan their next steps and to talk about what they might find. Archeon Prime was beautiful. The planet was covered in forests and mountains, with cities built into the natural landscape instead of replacing it. The Archeon people valued knowledge above everything else. Their whole civilization was organized around the collection and preservation of information. The Grand Archive was their greatest achievement, a massive structure that held copies of every important document from every known species. They landed at the archive complex just after dawn. The building was enormous, stretching for miles in every direction. It looked ancient, built from white stone that seemed to glow in the morning light. Thousands of Archeons moved through the grounds, scholars and researchers from all over the galaxy. Inside, they were met by Kelvin Rhodes, the chief archivist. Kelvin was human, one of the few who had chosen to live permanently on Archeon Prime. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and kind eyes. He had married an Archeon woman 20 years ago and now considered himself more Archeon than human. "Jake," Kelvin said, shaking his hand warmly, "your message was interesting." "Very interesting. Come, I have prepared a private research room for you." They followed him through long hallways lined with shelves of books and data storage units. The archive was quiet except for the soft sound of footsteps and the occasional whisper of voices. The research room was small but comfortable. There were desks with computer terminals and comfortable chairs. Kelvin closed the door behind them and activated a privacy field. "Now," he said, "tell me what you are really looking for." Jake explained everything: the old maps, the mental blocks, the silence protocol. As he talked, Kelvin's expression changed from curious to concerned to frightened. When Jake finished, the archivist sat down heavily. "I should have seen this," Kelvin said quietly. "I have been working here for 15 years. I have handled thousands of ancient documents. I must have seen references to this boundary dozens of times, but I never noticed the pattern." He looked at Jake. "Why can I think about it now? Why does talking to you break whatever is blocking my mind?" "We do not know," Lynn said, "but we need to find out. Can you help us access the restricted archives?" Kelvin nodded slowly. "Yes, but I should warn you. Some of the oldest records are corrupted, not damaged but deliberately altered. Sections deleted, words replaced, entire documents made unreadable. Someone has been trying to hide this information for a very long time." He led them deeper into the archive, to a section that required special clearance to enter. The air here was colder and the lights were dimmer. Kelvin accessed a terminal and began searching through databases. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard. "Here," he said. "These are the oldest surviving documents that mention the boundary. They are fragments, pieces of larger text that have been lost." Jake looked at the screen. The text was in an ancient language, but the computer provided a translation. He read slowly. The treaty was signed in the year of Ashen Silence. The First Council made their decision. The containment field was established. All species bound by blood and oath to maintain the protocol. No ship shall cross. No question shall be asked. The memory shall fade until none remain who remember the reason. Containment field, Lynn said. They were containing something. Or someone. She looked at Jake. What if they were containing us? What if ancient humanity was dangerous somehow, and the other species built this barrier to keep us trapped? But we were not even spacefaring back then, Jake said. How could we be a threat? Thelvara spoke up. Perhaps you were. Perhaps your history is wrong. Perhaps humans were spacefaring long ago and something happened that made you forget. Kelvin pulled up more documents. They spent hours reading through fragments and corrupted files. Slowly a picture began to form. The First Council was real. It was a coalition of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, formed 8,000 years ago in response to some great crisis. The Silence Protocol was their solution to that crisis. But what was the crisis? That part was always missing from the records. Every document that mentioned it directly was corrupted beyond recovery. It was like someone had gone through the entire galactic historical record and systematically removed every reference to what actually happened. As the day wore on, Lynn started acting strangely. She would be reading something on her screen, taking notes, and then suddenly stop. Her eyes would go unfocused. When Jake asked if she was okay, she would blink and look confused as if she had forgotten what she was doing. It happened again an hour later. Lynn was reading a document about the First Council when she suddenly stood up and walked to the door. "Jake," she said, "I think we should stop this research. It is not important. We should go back to the station." Her voice sounded flat, emotionless. Jake grabbed her arm gently. "Lynn, listen to me. You do not really think that. Something is making you think that. Fight it." Lynn blinked. Her eyes cleared. She looked down at Jake's hand on her arm, then back at his face. "What just happened?" she asked. "I felt like I had to leave. Like staying here was dangerous." Kelvin was watching with concern. "The mental block is trying to affect her. But it is not as strong on humans as it is on other species. She can fight it if she knows what is happening." They decided to take a break. They left the archive and went to a nearby cafe. Outside in the fresh air and sunlight, Lynn felt better. While they were eating, Jake noticed someone watching them. A man in a dark uniform was standing across the street, not trying to hide but not approaching either. Jake pointed him out to the others. "We are being followed," he said. Thelvara nodded. "I noticed him an hour ago. He arrived shortly after we entered the restricted section." The man finally crossed the street and walked up to their table. He was Draken, tall and covered in dark scales. His uniform bore the symbol of the Galactic Assembly Security Council. "My name is Commander Rax Veltros," he said. "I need to speak with Commander Morrison and Dr. Harper." Privately, they found a quiet spot in a nearby park. Rax stood facing them, his expression serious. "I have been sent to order you to cease your investigation. You are pursuing information that is classified at the highest level. If you continue, you will face serious consequences." Jake studied the Draken commander. "Why?" he asked. "What are we threatening by asking questions about old maps?" Rax opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. A strange look crossed his face. He tried to speak again, but no words came out. Finally, he said, "I do not know." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised them. "I was ordered to stop you," Rax continued slowly. "My commanding officer said this investigation poses a threat to galactic security. But when I try to think about why, my mind goes blank. I cannot remember the reason." Lynn leaned forward. "Commander Rax, do you believe your own order is justified? Or do you think you are being controlled by something?" Rax was silent for a long moment. Then he sat down on a nearby bench. He looked tired. "I have served in the Security Council for 20 years. I have never questioned an order before. But this feels wrong. I feel like a puppet being moved by invisible strings." Jake made a decision. He told Rax everything they had learned. About the maps, the mental blocks, the silence protocol. As he talked, he watched the Draken commander carefully. Rax's expression changed from skepticism to shock to something like relief. "You are saying that my entire species has been programmed to avoid thinking about certain things?" Rax asked. "That we have been living under some kind of mental control for thousands of years?" Jake nodded. "And humans seem to be immune to it. That is why we can investigate this when others cannot." Rax stood up. He paced back and forth, thinking. Finally, he turned back to them. "I cannot stop you. I will not stop you. But I need to understand what is happening. I need to know if my thoughts are my own. Can I help you with your investigation?" That is how their group grew from 3 to 4. Rax used his security clearance to access even more restricted files. Together, they worked through the night, reading document after document. And finally, just before dawn, Kelvin found something important. "Look at this," he said, his voice excited. "It is a coordinate, hidden in an old navigation chart from the First Council era. The notation says it points to a vault, a secure storage facility for critical information. If we want to know what really happened 8,000 years ago, we need to go there." Jake looked at the coordinates. They pointed to a system far from any current civilization, a dead zone that appeared on modern maps as empty space. "Where is that?" he asked. Kelvin checked another database. "It is listed as System 447 in the old charts, but there is a note here. Forbidden Zone. Travel restricted by unanimous vote of the First Council. No reason given." Thelvara looked worried. "If we go there, we will be breaking ancient laws. Laws that every civilization still follows without knowing why." Rax nodded. "My people will consider it an act of war if we enter that system without authorization, and I doubt authorization can be obtained. But we have to go," Lynn said. "We have come this far. If we stop now, we will never know the truth." Jake agreed. We need a ship. Something small. The journey to System 447 took 6 days. They traveled through empty space far from any established trade routes. Rax kept the ship's stealth systems active the entire time, making them nearly invisible to sensors. Still, everyone felt nervous. They were breaking laws that were older than recorded history. During the trip, they got to know each other better. Rax told stories about his career in the Security Council. Delvara shared memories of her long life on dozens of different worlds. Lynn talked about her love of ancient mysteries. And Jake found himself talking about why he became a liaison officer, about his belief that different species could work together if they just tried to understand each other. But beneath the friendly conversation, tension grew. Each of them wondered what they would find. Each of them felt the weight of the invisible force that had kept this secret hidden for so long. Lynn had more episodes where she suddenly wanted to turn back. Each time the others helped her fight through it. The mental programming was trying harder to stop them now. When they finally arrived at System 447, they found a graveyard. The system had once held planets, but now only rubble remained. Asteroid fields circled a dying star. Scattered through the debris were pieces of ancient structures, metal frameworks that might have been space stations or shipyards. Everything was dead and cold. What happened here? Lynn whispered. Jake looked at the destruction on the scanners. A war, a big one. This whole system was destroyed. Rax checked his instruments. I am reading something unusual. There is a structure ahead, intact. It is using some kind of power field to protect itself from the debris. They flew closer. The structure was massive, bigger than any building Jake had ever seen. It looked like a black cube, perfectly smooth, floating in the void. No lights, no windows, no visible entrances. But as they approached, something changed. A doorway appeared on one side, glowing with soft blue light. I think it knows we are here, Delvara said nervously. Rax maneuvered the ship toward the entrance. They docked carefully and suited up. Jake took a deep breath before opening the airlock. Whatever they were about to find, there was no turning back now. Inside, the vault was pristine. The walls glowed with the same soft blue light they had seen from outside. The air was breathable, kept fresh by systems that had been running for thousands of years. They walked through empty corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Then a voice spoke, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Welcome. I am Keeper Protocol 7. I have been waiting. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It sounded artificial but somehow warm. We are looking for information, Jake said, about the Silence Protocol, about what happened 8,000 years ago. There was a pause. Then the voice said, You are human. Yes, Jake confirmed. Does that matter? It is everything. You are the only species permitted to access this facility. The treaty specified that only humans could learn this truth. All others must remain unaware. But they are with me, Jake said, gesturing to his companions. The AI seemed to consider this. They came here of their own will? Yes, then they may stay. But be warned. What you are about to learn will be difficult to accept. The AI led them to a central chamber. The room was circular, with a holographic projector in the middle. Please sit. The projection will take several hours. You will see the complete historical record of the war and the treaty. Jake and the others sat on benches that appeared from the floor. The lights dimmed, and the story began. The hologram showed the galaxy as it was 8,000 years ago. It looked similar to today, but the political borders were different. And in the center of the display, covering a huge portion of the map, was a single unified territory. The Terran Ascendancy humans, the AI explained. But not the humans you know today. These were your ancestors. They had reached the stars thousands of years before your recorded history begins. They built an empire that spanned 10,000 star systems. They were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The hologram showed cities on 1,000 worlds. Massive ships that moved between the stars like schools of fish. Technology so advanced it looked like magic. Jake felt pride swelling in his chest. Our ancestors did all that? Then the image changed and the pride turned to horror. War. Ships attacking planets. Cities burning. Entire species being conquered or destroyed. The Terran Ascendancy was not just advanced. They were aggressive. They conquered everyone they met. Some species they absorbed into their empire. Others they wiped out completely. The hologram showed battle after battle, each one a massacre. Beside Jake, Rax made a sound of pain. His scales had gone pale. On the hologram, Dracon worlds were being attacked. Cities fell. Millions died. Now Rax understood why the name Terran Ascendancy had been erased from history. His people could not have survived remembering this. The Ascendancy was not evil, the AI continued. They believed they were bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. They thought their way was best. But they could not stop. Every victory led to another war. Every conquest required them to maintain control through force. They became trapped in a cycle of endless conflict. The hologram showed the formation of the First Council. The surviving species, desperate and nearly broken, came together. They could not defeat the Ascendancy militarily. Humans were too strong, too advanced, so they developed something else. A weapon that targeted not bodies but minds. The Silence Protocol was a mimetic weapon. It worked by altering brain chemistry, creating psychological barriers that made certain thoughts impossible. Once deployed, it would affect every species in the galaxy except humans. Those species would forget about the Ascendancy. They would be unable to think about human space. They would avoid it without knowing why, but there was a condition. The humans had to agree to it. The First Council sent a delegation to Earth with an ultimatum. Accept the Silence Protocol and be isolated from the galaxy, or face a united coalition that would fight until every human world was destroyed. It would be a war that nobody would survive. The hologram showed debates in the Ascendancy's ruling council. Some leaders wanted to fight. They were certain they could win, but others, a growing number, were tired. They had been fighting for so long. They had conquered so much, and they were starting to realize that they had become monsters. A woman appeared in the hologram. She wore a military uniform covered in medals. Her face was hard, but her eyes were sad. "This is Colonel Helen Price," the AI said. She was the last military commander of the Terran Ascendancy. She led the faction that argued for accepting the protocol. Colonel Price spoke in the hologram. Her voice was recorded 8,000 years ago, but it sounded clear and strong. "We have won every war. We have defeated every enemy. But victory has become meaningless. We fight because we do not know how to stop. We conquer because it is all we know. The First Council offers us something we cannot give ourselves. An ending." The debate continued for weeks. Finally, the Ascendancy leadership voted. They would accept the Silence Protocol. But they went further than the First Council asked. They decided that humans themselves needed to forget. The Ascendancy would destroy itself completely. They would erase all records, destroy all advanced technology, scatter their people across primitive colonies. In 2 generations, human civilization collapsed back to a pre-industrial state. In 4 generations, nobody remembered that they had ever traveled to the stars. It was a controlled fall, carefully managed to minimize deaths, but it was still the end of everything they had built. The AI showed them the final days of the Ascendancy. Ships being dismantled, libraries being burned, scientists destroying their own research. Colonel Price appeared again, older now, speaking her last recorded words. "We were given a choice between being remembered as conquerors or being forgotten entirely. We chose to be forgotten. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when our descendants reach the stars again, they will be better than we were." The hologram faded. The lights came back up. Jake sat in silence, trying to process what he had seen. Everything he thought he knew about human history was wrong. Humanity had not peacefully joined the galactic community 200 years ago as newcomers. They had returned after a self-imposed exile of 8,000 years. Rax was shaking. Jake could see tears on his scaled face. "My people, your ancestors killed millions of my people." Lynn looked sick. She had devoted her life to studying ancient civilizations. Now she knew that the greatest civilization in galactic history had belonged to her own species, and it had been built on blood. Delvara spoke quietly. "Now I understand why we were programmed to forget. This pain, this horror is too much to carry. Better to forget and start fresh." But Jake was thinking about something else. The AI said the treaty allowed only humans to access this information. Why? What was the point of preserving this history if it was just going to stay hidden? He asked the question aloud. The AI responded immediately. "There are fail-safes built into the Silence Protocol. If modern humanity ever becomes a threat again, the memories will return to all species. They will remember what you were, and they will unite against you as they did before. This vault exists to warn you, to remind you of the price your ancestors paid for peace." Jake felt cold. "So if we step out of line, the entire galaxy will suddenly..." The trip to the first remnant colony took 3 days. Nobody talked much. Each person was lost in their own thoughts, trying to accept what they had learned. Jake spent hours staring at the walls of his cabin, wondering who he really was. Was he the descendant of peaceful explorers or brutal conquerors? Could he be both? Rax was struggling even more. Several times Jake found him alone in the common room, looking at old Dracon historical records that mentioned a dark age, a time when Dracon civilization nearly died out. Now Rax knew why. The Terran ascendancy had done that to his people. One night Jake sat with Rax and tried to find the right words. "I am sorry. I know that does not change anything, but I need to say it. My ancestors did terrible things to your people." Rax looked at him with those yellow Dracon eyes. "You did not do those things. Your ancestors did. But the question is, would you do them? If you had the power they had, would you use it the same way?" "I hope not," Jake said. "I want to believe that modern humans are different. But how can I know for sure? How can anyone?" Rax nodded slowly. "That is the question we all must answer. Not just about you, but about ourselves. My people were victims of the ascendancy. But if we had been the ones with superior technology, would we have been any better?" The colony was called Haven's End. It was located in a system hidden behind a massive radiation cloud. No casual traveler would ever find it. According to the coordinates from the vault, this community had been established during the collapse of the ascendancy. People who refused to give up their technology and culture had come here to wait. As they approached the planet, they were intercepted by defense ships. These vessels looked nothing like modern human designs. They were sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that made Rax's military scout look like a toy. A voice came over the communication system. "Identify yourselves." Jake explained who they were and why they had come. There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "You have been expected. Follow the escort ships to the surface. Do not deviate from the assigned flight path." The defense ships surrounded them and guided them down through the atmosphere. The planet was beautiful. Green forests covered most of the land. Cities rose from the trees, built with technology that looked centuries ahead of anything in the modern galaxy. People moved through the streets in vehicles that floated on invisible fields. The architecture was human but alien at the same time. Familiar shapes combined in unfamiliar ways. They landed at a government complex in the capital city. Waiting for them was a man in formal clothing. He was tall and looked to be about 60 years old with gray hair and hard eyes. "I am Governor Carl Bennett. Welcome to Haven's End." He looked at Rax and Thelvara with obvious suspicion. "You brought outsiders here." "That was unwise. They came with us willingly," Jake said. "They deserve to know the truth." Bennett frowned. "The truth is not for them. The truth is for us. For humans. But you are here now, so come. We have much to discuss." He led them through the complex to a conference room. Inside, other leaders were waiting. Men and women who carried themselves with military precision. They looked at Jake and his companions with a mixture of curiosity and disappointment. Governor Bennett gestured for everyone to sit. "For 8,000 years we have waited. We preserved the knowledge and technology of the ascendancy. We maintained our military readiness. We prepared for the day when our descendants would return to space and need our help. And what do we find?" Bennett's voice was bitter. "We find humans who have become soft, who smile at the species that should fear them, who have forgotten what it means to be strong." Lynn spoke up. "Maybe forgetting was necessary. Maybe the ascendancy needed to end because it was wrong." Bennett laughed harshly. "Wrong? We brought order to chaos. We united the galaxy under a single banner. Yes, there was war. But there is always war. At least we won." "You did not win," Rax said quietly. "You destroyed yourselves because you could not stop conquering. The ascendancy died because it was unsustainable." Bennett turned to face the Draken. "And who are you to judge us? Your people were weak. You could not defend yourselves. That is not our fault." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "That is enough. We did not come here to argue about ancient history. We came to learn, to understand what we are." Bennett studied him for a moment. "Then what are you, Commander Morrison? Are you human or are you something less?" Over the next 2 days, Bennett showed them Haven's End, the weapons factories that could build ships capable of destroying planets. The training facilities where soldiers learned tactics that had conquered the galaxy once before. The archives that held every secret of ascendancy technology. It was impressive and terrifying. "We could help you," Bennett said as they toured a massive shipyard. "Modern humanity is weak, but you do not have to stay that way. With our technology and your numbers, we could rebuild the ascendancy. We could take our rightful place as the dominant power in the galaxy. Why would we want that? Jake asked. What did the ascendancy's dominance get our ancestors except endless war and eventual suicide? Bennett shook his head. You do not understand. Power is not optional. Either you have it or someone else does. Either you control your own destiny or others control it for you. The silence protocol has protected you so far, but what happens when it fails? What happens when the galaxy remembers what you are and decides you are too dangerous to exist? That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about Bennett's words. There was logic to them, even if Jake did not want to admit it. The galaxy was not a safe place. Species competed for resources and territory. Modern humanity had been lucky, protected by a treaty they did not even know existed. But luck could run out. He found Lynn in the ship's galley drinking coffee. She looked as tired as he felt. I keep thinking about Colonel Price, she said. The woman from the hologram. She chose to destroy everything rather than continue the cycle of violence. That took courage. Real courage. More than it would have taken to keep fighting. Jake sat down next to her. Do you think we are making the right choice? Investigating this, maybe we should have left it buried. Lynn was quiet for a moment. I do not know, but I think we deserve to know our own history. Even the parts that are ugly. Especially the parts that are ugly. On the third day, news arrived that changed everything. A messenger ship appeared in the system, breaking through the defense perimeter. It carried an emergency broadcast from the modern human government. One of humanity's outer colonies had been attacked. The attackers were a species called the Vorath. They were young by galactic standards, only a few hundred years into space travel. They had expanded aggressively, taking systems that other species claimed were theirs. Now they had crossed into human space, probably not even aware that it was supposed to be forbidden. The colony they attacked was called New Providence. It was a farming world, lightly defended. The colonists had tried to communicate peacefully. The Vorath had responded with weapons fire. Hundreds were dead. The survivors were calling for help, for protection, for justice. Bennett watched the news with satisfaction. You see, this is what happens when you are weak. The galaxy does not respect peace, it respects strength. He turned to Jake. Let us help you. We can send ships to defend your colony. Ships that will make the Vorath regret they ever heard of humanity. Jake felt torn. Part of him wanted to accept. The colonists on New Providence needed help, but another part of him remembered the holograms from the vault, the burning cities, the millions of dead. If they used ascendancy weapons, even in defense, where would it end? Rax pulled Jake aside. Listen to me carefully. If ascendancy ships leave this hidden system, if they cross into the wider galaxy, the failsafes will trigger. My people, the Krell, the Archeons, everyone will suddenly remember. They will remember the wars, the conquests, the genocides, and they will unite against you. But people are dying, Jake said. What am I supposed to do? Let them die? Rax gripped his shoulder. Find another way. Modern humanity has built something good. You are respected throughout the galaxy. You are seen as honest, peaceful, fair. Do not throw that away for revenge. Jake made his decision. He thanked Governor Bennett for his hospitality, but declined the offer of military aid. Bennett looked disgusted. You are weak, just as I thought. When your colonies burn and your people die, remember that you chose this. You could have been strong. They left Haven's End and set course for human space. The trip would take a week. Jake spent that time trying to figure out what to do. The Vorath attack had created a crisis. If humanity did not respond, they would look weak. Other species might see them as easy targets. But if they responded too strongly, they might trigger something far worse. There was another problem, too. Now that he knew the truth, what was he supposed to do with it? Keep it secret and let humanity continue in ignorance? Or reveal everything and risk destroying the peaceful relationships that humans had built over 200 years? Lynn suggested a third option. What if we control how the truth comes out? What if we tell the story ourselves before the failsafes force everyone to remember? We could frame it properly, explain what the ascendancy was and why modern humans are different. Thelvara agreed. The galaxy will handle the truth better if it comes as a... When they arrived at Earth, Jake found a government in chaos. The attack on New Providence had triggered fears throughout human space. Colony governments were demanding military protection. Some were even talking about building weapons, big ones, the kind that could destroy entire fleets. Jake went straight to the United Earth Council. He requested an emergency meeting with Admiral Kate Sullivan, the highest-ranking officer in the Human Defense Forces. She agreed to see him immediately. Admiral Sullivan was in her 60s with short gray hair and a face marked by years of difficult decisions. She listened without interrupting as Jake told her everything. About the vault, about the Terran ascendancy, about the silence protocol and the failsafes. When he finished, she sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I wish you had never found this. We were happy in our ignorance." But she sighed. "But now that we know, we have to deal with it." She pulled up tactical displays on her screen. "We have another problem. Our sensors are detecting unusual activity from several of the old galactic powers. Ancient defense systems are coming online. Weapons platforms that have been dormant for thousands of years are suddenly active." Jake felt a chill. "The failsafes are triggering. Something about the crisis with the Vorath is starting to wake the galaxy's buried memories." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Which means we are running out of time. If those memories fully activate while we are at war with the Vorath, every species in the galaxy will suddenly remember hating us. They will attack. We cannot win a war against everyone. That is why we need to tell the truth first," Jake said. "On our terms. Before the failsafes force them to remember. We need to take control of the narrative." Sullivan looked skeptical. "And you think they will just accept it? That they will forgive us for what our ancestors did?" "No," Jake admitted. "But I think we have a better chance if we are honest than if we try to hide it. The Ascendancy's biggest mistake was believing they could control everything through force. We need to try something different: trust, transparency." Sullivan laughed bitterly. "You want to save humanity through a press conference." But then she stopped laughing. "Actually, it might be the only option we have. Tell me your plan." Jake outlined his idea. They would invite representatives from every major species to the vault in System 447. There, they would show everyone the historical records. They would let the other species see the truth directly, not filtered through human interpretation. And most importantly, they would do it while humans were actively choosing peace in the Vorath situation. "We need to show them that we are different," Jake explained. "Not through words, but through actions. We handle the Vorath crisis peacefully. We reveal our violent past voluntarily. We demonstrate that knowing the truth does not make us dangerous." Sullivan thought about it. "What about the Vorath themselves? They need to be stopped. They attacked our people." Jake nodded. "We stop them. But we do it with modern weapons and modern tactics. We show that we can defend ourselves without using ascendancy technology. We prove that strength and restraint can coexist." The Admiral started making calls. Within hours, plans were in motion. A human fleet would be sent to confront the Vorath. At the same time, diplomatic messages would go out to every major species inviting them to a conference at the vault. The message was simple and direct. Humanity has discovered a truth that affects the entire galaxy. Please come and see for yourselves. The responses came back quickly. Most species agreed to send representatives. Some were curious. Some were suspicious. All of them were confused about why humans would organize such a meeting. Meanwhile, the human fleet reached New Providence and engaged the Vorath forces. The battle was brief but decisive. The human ships were outnumbered, but they were better trained and better coordinated. They disabled the Vorath vessels without destroying them. Then they broadcast a message. "Leave human space and do not return. The next time we will not be so gentle." The Vorath retreated. They had learned that humans were not easy prey. But they had also learned that humans would rather disable than destroy, would rather warn than annihilate. Word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. People noticed that humanity had been strong without being brutal. 3 days later, representatives from 40 different species gathered at the vault. They came in ships of all sizes and designs. Some were nervous, some were excited. None of them knew what they were about to learn. Jake stood at the entrance to the vault with Rax, Lynn, and Thelvara. Behind them, the AI known as Keeper Protocol 7 waited in the darkness. Admiral Sullivan was there too. She had insisted on coming to represent Earth's government. As the delegates arrived, she greeted each one personally. Jake watched her work. She was good at this, making people feel welcome while also projecting strength. They were going to need both. When everyone was assembled, Jake stepped forward. He had prepared a speech, but now that the moment was here, the words felt inadequate. How do you tell people that their entire understanding of history is wrong? How do you admit that your ancestors were monsters? He decided to be direct. Thank you all for coming. What you are about to learn will be difficult. Some of you may be angry, some may be frightened. All of those reactions are valid. But I ask that you watch and listen before you decide how to respond. The vault will show you the truth. All of it. Then we can decide together what to do with that knowledge. The AI activated the holographic projectors. The delegates watched as the history of the Terran ascendancy unfolded. They saw the rise of human civilization. They saw the conquest of the galaxy. They saw their own worlds being attacked, their own ancestors dying. The room was silent except for occasional gasps or cries of pain. Jake watched the faces of the delegates. A Draken warrior was shaking with rage. A Krell scholar had tears running down her scales. An Archeon priest was praying quietly. These were people discovering that their nightmares were real, that the monsters from their forgotten past had been human. The hologram showed the end of the ascendancy. Colonel Price appeared, speaking her final words about choosing to be forgotten. The hologram ended. The lights came up. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was heavy with shock and grief and anger. Finally, the Drakon warrior stood. His name was General Vorn, and he was known as a fierce but honorable fighter. He walked toward Jake. For a moment, Jake thought the general was going to attack him. Instead, Vorn stopped a few feet away. "Why?" he asked. His voice was rough with emotion. "Why show us this? Why not let us continue in ignorance?" "Because you deserve to know," Jake said. "Because hiding it would be continuing the ascendancy's greatest sin, which was believing that others did not deserve the truth." Vorn studied him. "You understand that this changes everything? That we can never go back to the way things were?" Jake nodded. "I understand. But maybe the way things were was not as good as we thought." Another delegate stood. She was from the Valar Collective, a species known for their calm logic. "My people have a question. If ancient humans were so powerful, why did they destroy themselves?" "What changed?" Admiral Sullivan answered. "They realized that power without purpose is meaningless. They realized that conquering everything left them with nothing worth having. They chose to end rather than continue." "And you?" the Valar delegate asked, looking at the modern humans in the room. "Are you like them? If you had their power, would you use it the same way?" This was the moment Jake had been dreading. He took a deep breath. "I hope not. We cannot know for certain, but we can show you through our actions. We just defeated the Vorath. We could have destroyed their fleet. We chose not to. That has to count for something." Rax stepped forward. He had been quiet until now, but his voice carried authority. "I have fought beside these humans. I have seen them make difficult choices. They are not their ancestors. They are different. Not perfect, but different." He looked around the room. "We all carry the weight of our history. The question is not what our ancestors did. The question is what we choose to do now." The Krell scholar spoke up. "There is still the matter of the failsafes. The silence protocol was designed to protect us from humans. If we dismantle it, what protects us if they become dangerous again?" Lynn answered. "Nothing. Nothing except trust and the relationships we build together. The ascendancy fell because they trusted only in force. Maybe the solution is to trust in something else." The discussion continued for hours. Some delegates were ready to give modern humanity a chance. Others wanted guarantees, safeguards, some way to ensure that history would not repeat. A few were too angry or frightened to even consider reconciliation. Finally, General Vorn spoke again. "I lost ancestors to the ascendancy. My people carry scars from that time. Even if we did not remember the cause, I should hate you. Part of me does." But he looked at Jake with something like respect. "You did not have to tell us. You could have kept this secret forever. The fact that you chose to reveal it says something about who you are." He turned to address all the delegates. "I propose we give them a chance. Not trust, not yet, but a chance. Let us create a new treaty, one that acknowledges the past but focuses on the future. Let us dismantle the silence protocol carefully, under controlled conditions, and let us watch. If modern humans prove they are different, we honor that. If they prove they..." 6 months later, Jake stood in a garden on Earth. It was early morning and the sun was just rising over the mountains. The garden was peaceful, full of flowers and trees from all over the planet. Birds sang in the branches. A stream ran through the center, its water clear and cold. This place was new. It had been built as a memorial, a place to remember and to think. At the center of the garden stood 2 monuments. The first was a wall made of dark stone. Carved into it were names. Thousands and thousands of names. These were the species that the Terran Ascendancy had destroyed or subjugated. Some of the names were in languages nobody spoke anymore. Some belonged to civilizations that no longer existed. Jake read some of the names aloud quietly. The Keldar Dominion, the Praxis Unity, the Vorthal clans. Each name represented millions of lives, cultures that had been erased by human ambition. The wall was a reminder of what happened when power was used without wisdom. The second monument stood beside the first. It was made of white stone and carved with different names. The Krell Medical Exchange Program, the Draken Cultural Institute, the Valor Science Collaboration. These were the partnerships that modern humanity had built over 200 years of peaceful contact. Programs that had helped people instead of hurting them. Projects that had built bridges instead of walls. Jake noticed that the second list was longer than the first. That meant something. It meant that in the time since humanity returned to space, they had created more good than their ancestors had created harm. It was not perfect balance. Nothing could erase what the Ascendancy had done, but it was a start. Lynn found him there. She looked different now, more confident, more at peace. The last 6 months had been busy for her. As the galaxy's leading expert on the Ascendancy period, she had been traveling constantly, giving lectures and helping other species understand their newly recovered memories. It was hard work, but important. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Jake smiled. "Better than I expected. The truth is out there now. We cannot hide from it, but we also cannot let it define us." Lynn nodded. She looked at the monuments. "I spoke with a Draken historian yesterday. She told me that her people are teaching their children about the Ascendancy Wars. Not to create hate, but to create understanding, so that everyone knows what can happen when any species becomes too powerful." "That is good," Jake said. "We all need to learn from history, not just humans." They walked together through the garden. The dismantling of the Silence Protocol had been completed 2 months ago. The process had been careful and controlled, but there had still been problems. Some species had reacted with anger when their memories returned. There had been protests, even a few incidents of violence against human traders and diplomats. But there had also been moments of grace. Species that reached out to modern humans and said they understood that the past was past. Communities that chose reconciliation over revenge. The galaxy was learning to live with the truth. Slowly and painfully, but learning nonetheless. The Vorath situation had been resolved through negotiation. After their initial defeat, they had been willing to talk. They learned about the history they had stumbled into and apologized for the attack on New Providence. A treaty was signed. Compensation was paid to the victims. Both sides agreed to establish peaceful relations. It was not perfect, but it worked. "What about Haven's End?" Lynn asked. "Have you heard from Governor Bennett?" Jake shook his head. "Not directly. But I know they are still there, still maintaining their technology. Admiral Sullivan has been in contact with them. She is trying to convince them to integrate with modern human society. Some of them are willing. Others still believe we are too soft. It will take time," Lynn said. "They have been isolated for 8,000 years. You cannot change that kind of culture overnight," Jake agreed. At least they were not fighting. The remnant colonies had agreed to stay hidden for now, to give modern humanity time to prove itself. If things went well, maybe eventually they could rejoin the wider human community and share their knowledge. If things went badly, they would remain as a backup, a last resort. Rax arrived in the garden. He had become a frequent visitor to Earth, working as a liaison between the Dracon Confederation and human governments. His presence was symbolic. If a Dracon, whose people had suffered so much under the Ascendancy, could work with humans, it gave others hope that reconciliation was possible. "The Recognition Accord is being ratified today," Rax said. "All 47 member species of the Galactic Assembly are expected to sign. It will become official law." Jake felt relief wash over him. That was good news. The Accord established new rules for interaction between species. It included protections for weaker civilizations and accountability measures for stronger ones. Most importantly, it required transparency. No more hidden treaties. No more secret protocols. Everything would be open. Delvara joined them. She moved slower these days. The stress of the last 6 months had aged her, but her eyes were bright with satisfaction. I never thought I would see this day. A galaxy that knows its own history. A galaxy that chooses to face its past instead of hiding from it. She looked at Jake. You did something remarkable. You asked a question that nobody else could ask, and you had the courage to follow it through to the end. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just wanted to understand. I did not set out to change the galaxy. Thelvera smiled. The best changes often come from simple curiosity. You wanted to know why the map ended at human space. Now the whole galaxy knows, and we are all better for it. They stood together in the garden, 4 people from different species who had been brought together by a mystery. They had started as strangers. Now they were friends, bound by shared experience and shared purpose. The galaxy was different now. The borders on the map had changed. Human space was no longer surrounded by empty coordinates. Trade routes crossed through it freely. Scientific expeditions explored systems that had been forbidden for thousands of years. But the biggest change was in how people thought. The Silence Protocol had kept everyone safe by making them forget. The Recognition Accord kept everyone safe by making them remember. By acknowledging the past, by facing it honestly, the galaxy could move forward with open eyes. Still, Jake worried. He had seen the Ascendancy weapons at Haven's End. He had felt the power they represented. That power still existed, hidden away but ready if needed. And he knew human nature. People were capable of great kindness and terrible cruelty. Modern humans were not so different from their ancestors. The same impulses existed, the same desires for security and dominance. Late that night, Jake could not sleep. He went for a walk through the city. It was quiet. Most people were asleep. He found himself near the memorial garden again. In the darkness, the monuments looked different. The names on the wall of victims seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. He thought about Colonel Price, the last military commander of the Terran Ascendancy. She had made the hardest choice possible. She had ended her own civilization to stop the cycle of violence. Jake wondered if he could have done the same thing. If modern humanity faced a similar choice, would they have the courage to do what was right instead of what was easy? As he stood there, Jake felt something strange, a tickling sensation at the back of his mind, thoughts that were not quite his own, patterns of thinking that felt alien yet familiar. He recognized them from the vault. These were Ascendancy patterns, ways of analyzing tactical situations and evaluating threats. The mental programming that had made the Ascendancy so effective at war. The Silence Protocol had not just affected other species. It had also blocked humans from accessing certain parts of their own psychology. Now that the protocol was gone, those blocks were fading. Jake could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. They were not controlling him. They were just there, available if he chose to use them. That was terrifying. It meant that every human potentially carried the Ascendancy within them. The capacity for conquest, the ability to rationalize violence, the patterns of thought that led to 8,000 years of war. But Jake realized something else. Having those patterns did not mean using them. Modern humans also had other patterns. Patterns of cooperation, patterns of empathy, the capacity to choose peace even when violence was easier. The question was not whether humans could be violent. Clearly they could. The question was whether they would choose to be. And that choice had to be made every day by every person in every situation. There were no guarantees, no perfect solutions, just the ongoing work of choosing to be better than the worst parts of yourself. Jake returned to his apartment as the sun was rising. He made coffee and sat by the window watching the city wake up. Ships crossed the sky, heading to orbit and beyond. Some were human vessels, some belonged to other species. They moved together, sharing the space, coexisting peacefully. For now, at least, peace held. The galactic map no longer ended at human space. The barriers were down. The truth was known. And somehow, despite everything, the galaxy was still working. Not perfectly. There were still problems, still tensions, still fears. But people were trying. That was what mattered. Jake thought about the future. In 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, would humanity still be choosing peace? Would other species still be